there's always going to be tension between cops and criminals. But fuck it. Let's sit them down in the room and see if they can work it out.
He can't say that.
Sir, you can't
Is he
say
allowed
that.
to say
I'll
that?
say it louder.
My first claim is that cops only use lethal force as a last resort.
Do cops only use lethal force as a last resort?
So, I don't know how many times I've seen, instead of them try to de-escalate the situation, they just pull out the gun. They maybe say a couple commands, and if things don't go their way, they use a weapon. I just saw a video where some lady was picking up some boiling water. She's obviously not okay in the head, and the cop
I think he's
took it
referring
upon
to
himself
Sonia
to
Massey.
threaten lethal force, and the woman, like I said, wasn't all the way there. She threatened to use the scalding water to throw it on him, and he just immediately shot her.
Do you want me to tell you the parts of that video that were wrong?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear your side, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the cop was 100% wrong on that one, from what I've seen.
Okay.
But we also got to remember, there's always more to the story than you see on video.
No, there's
Those
not
of you
always
out
more.
here, Rodney King, okay?
Oh.
Rodney King, there was a lot of footage there where Rodney King, who's 6'7",
Sometimes what you see
who
is what it is.
high on PCP, who led the police on a chase, and he won't stop, he won't follow commands. So there's more to that story. This one, unfortunately, from what I've seen, that cop is 100% wrong, and I will call
Okay.
that cop out. That woman was too far away. She had boiling water, and she said something about, in the name of Jesus, I bless you, or something like that. Because
But
most
is
people,
that
If you're not aware of the Sonia Massey situation, I believe she was having a mental health crisis. Police were called to do a welfare check on her. Her and the cop go back and forth. She says she's going to throw boiling water on him, and she ends up shot. So that's the situation that they're referring to in this part of the segment. And the guy on the panel, he's agreeing that that was a bad shooting. The cop that was on site wasn't in imminent danger, and you need to be in imminent danger. You can't just go around shooting people. When I was in the military, they had escalation of force and rules of engagement. It's saying, at what point do you escalate a situation, and how do you escalate the situation? It goes between, there's a bunch of different steps between stop what you're doing to now you have holes in your body because I couldn't stop you and you were going to do something to me or somebody in this situation, in the surrounding area. So I'm not entirely sure what cops are taught in terms of that type of escalation of force and rules of engagement. But this cop is saying on the panel, he's saying there was not that imminent danger, or nobody was at threat of being harmed with the boiling water because of proximity between the cop and Sonia Massey. So at least he's coming into the conversation with a level head, but it's just the beginning. Let's see where it goes.
not using lethal force when it wasn't necessary?
yes.
Yeah, so that just defeats the whole,
Yes,
the whole
I agree.
conversation.
I actually agree with you. The only time you can use lethal force is when your life or somebody else's life is in imminent threat of death
Yep.
or serious bodily harm. His life doesn't meet that criteria.
Yeah, but there's always gray area. Like, for example, do you remember
So
that
he's
one time
probably
that some
going
lady,
to
she went,
jail
lady cop,
where he
she went to
belongs,
pull some guy out of the car.
by the way.
Instead of grabbing her taser, she used her gun.
Well, the threat level on a woman going against a guy, say if there's a 5-foot woman going
But did
against,
she not use lethal force when it wasn't necessary? She
Yeah,
was
but her threat
tending
level's
to use-
different.
She was trying to use her taser, and
So
she
the
ended up using her
circumstances are
gun.
different.
well,
So,
I
I mean,
was
that's a lack of training.
I was in an era before tasers, so I can't speak to that. However, a woman's threat level is different than a man's threat level.
Yeah, but that's your experience. But I mean, we're talking about facts here. Facts are she went and used her gun instead of using her taser. So
I
mean,
didn't
it's
see the video, so I'm trying to go on what you're telling me. But I am telling you there is a force continuum. There is constructive authority.
Okay, so they call it force continuum.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
All right. It's a pretty good conversation. Let's see what the next person has to say.
Well, crazy thing about it, you just went back on the statement right now by saying that he shouldn't have shot her. In the original statement, you said cops don't use lethal force until they have to. But then you
Most
said that
cops.
was a case where he shouldn't have used lethal force, and he did. There's plenty of cases, I'm sure you've seen them, where cops use lethal force and they shouldn't have. I get it. Sometimes they may be scared for their lives, even though the situation doesn't deem it for them to be scared for their lives. Sometimes they are.
You can't
But
tell people
I
what to
feel
be
like
scared
that's all
about,
in
though.
training. No, that's where training should be more.
People
because
should
there's lots
definitely
of cops that are just
have a
so
stronger
jittery and
backbone.
so trigger happy when they shouldn't be. When people are just doing regular things.
You're 100% correct, my friend. You're 100% correct. I've been saying this for years, that every cop should be at least a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. That's going to do two things. It's going to allow you to be able to handle yourself, but it's also going to be the confidence that's instilled within you in order to be able to handle yourself. The vast majority only use lethal force as a last resort. But there are occasions where, let's face it, there are certain people that should never be cops. I'll be the first one to tell you that. They got shoved in lockers in schools. They have a complex about them. Trust me, the cops who should be cops know exactly who those people are.
So the cop clarified, he said, most cops are not going to use lethal force unless it's as a last resort. And he made a good point. Cops should be trained in some sort of martial art. I would go so far as to say that everybody in the world should have at least a little bit of martial arts training. When you step outside of your house, you should be able to defend yourself because you don't want to be a victim in every situation that you encounter. But it's more specifically, like he said about cops, you're going to encounter a lot of people that are not mentally stable, a lot of people that are aggressive, a lot of people that are going to start a situation in one spot and they're going to escalate it just based on the interaction of having a cop there. And you don't want tools and weapons to be your only resort. Your first line of defense is always these, or, might be a knee, might be a shin. In the case that you don't have any of those weapons that they supply on their tool belt, you want to know that you can at least put these on somebody and give yourself a fighting chance. Cops especially, but everybody in general.
They have a God complex, and they should have never got that job. So I'll be the first one to tell you that.
And the
Talking
thing
about
is,
nerds that become
once
cops.
something happens where that cop that should have never had that job shows they should never have that job, a lot of times they never get fired. And if they do get fired, they can somehow just go to a different department and still work. And I'm not sure if that's true, but from what I've heard accounts, people can, let's say, get fired from one county, go to the next. Even though he has history of going to black and brown people and discriminating them, he still can have work. Or he can be paid leave. Paid leave is crazy to me because you can shoot somebody and then get paid just to sit at home. That's crazy to me. But what do you think on that? What do you think that's something that should happen?
So that particular cop you're talking about, that video, he's in 6 different departments. That should have been red
Same.
flag number 1.
Still talking about the Sonya
Okay, you
Massey
don't just keep
situation.
popping departments. There's obviously a problem there. Paid leave, something different. You sign a contract on this particular job, and that contract states that you are working until you either retire or you're terminated. So paid leave is you're basically out on an injury. I was out on an injury because there are wounds beyond gunshot wounds that
Absolutely.
will screw you up way worse than being shot. And trust me on
Psychological
that.
wounds.
Definitely. Might as well raise your flag. This is too much talking, bro. Thank you.
All right, brother.
In this segment, the cop said that police officers on the job until you retire or you get terminated. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that's why they go on paid administrative leave when they have situations with, accidental shootings or investigations. So that's new information to me. Don't know if it's new information to you, but it's interesting. And it kind of reminds me of the military. So if you're on active duty, you're basically on the clock 24/7 in case you need to be on call for something. And it seems like it's that way with police officers as well. The difference is with the military, you're not clocking in and clocking out. It's just inherently known that this is an order of business.
So, how do you feel about qualified immunity?
Qualified immunity, you're talking about a police officer being indemnified for their crimes, but can you give me an example so I can defend it a little bit better?
I started off with that because I feel like some
Okay.
officers, even
Check
though they
this out.
might not want to shoot, I feel like nobody wants to kill nobody, right? That's like the last option. But I feel like
I don't believe that.
they can
Some
get
people are
away with
crazy
it
that do
because
wanna kill
of these
people.
protections that they have.
So the best of my knowledge, qualified immunity was taken away. It
Yeah.
was taken away quite some time ago for good cause. Nobody, including police officers, is above the law. You can't just go out and kill people. Have they done it?
You can't kill
100%.
people, but
Steve
you get away
Caracappa
with
and Lou
stuff
Eppolito
based on
were
your
mob
proximity.
hitmen for the NYPD for years. But guess what? The law eventually caught up to them. It just took too long. Qualified immunity, it should have been something that's never there because police are held to a higher standard than everybody else.
Are they?
Absolutely.
They should
So, gentlemen, prior to you said the young man took a swing at a police officer. Well, what happened if this police officer just went up to somebody and took a swing at them? They're going to lose their job. Now, the person who took a swing at them, yeah, he might spend the night in jail if he gets caught. But other than that, there's really no real consequences.
I'm just saying though, they have these protections and they have these resources for them. Like most like investigations, when you said something about paid leave, right? And there's an investigation. How many times is that investigation from like an outside agency versus like the department? You know,
In New Jersey, every time.
so it's internal, right?
No, it's every time it's an outside agency.
Right. But would you say that's like the standard for everywhere else? You know,
Most of the time it is.
most cops, so they get away with it because of like they make excuses. Like even in the case recently where like the lady with the boiling water, she threw it towards the cop. That was wrong. Everybody
They've
knows
all
it
been
was
talking
wrong.
about some of your
But then
messages.
there's still people trying to fight and defend that. So you can't say that
Some people
they
cop
don't
ass
have
kisses.
protection. You know.
So
Well, of course they have protection. They you know, every defense attorney is hired by their client, even though their client might be guilty as hell. Every defense attorney has a duty to defend their client, whether it's a union attorney or whether it's a private attorney, it doesn't matter. They're going to have to protect their client.
And then that works out then.
But the internal investigation, they will go harder on you. My very good friend was under indictment for murder for 15 weeks, even though everything was on video and it was a totally clean shoot. Totally clean shoot, proven. Still 15 weeks with a murder indictment hanging over his head. So there's really not qualified immunity. The oversight over top of police shootings is so much more than everybody sees.
So for the first point, the guy was talking about qualified immunity and officers being held responsible for things that they do while on the job. Like, are you guys investigating yourselves and saying, hey, no wrongdoing? Or is there an outside agency coming independent of any relationships with the people that did the shooting or did the illegal crime that are cops? And are those people investigating them and giving the public a fair look at all of the facts? And based on what the cop is saying in this video, he's saying that majority of the time there's a third party that's unaffiliated with the police department, unaffiliated with those cops, and that's who's investigating the situation. The cop said, from the outside looking in, you're not going to see everything that's going on internally, but trust me, it's happening the way it should happen. I can see how, as a civilian, we may be missing some of the details because, like I said, from the outside looking in, it may look like everything in the house is copacetic, but on the inside, it could be a lot more chaos than we realize. I thought that the cops investigated themselves as well. I didn't know that there was a third party that would investigate and make sure that all of the facts were presented and that person was given a fair trial. Unless it went to the federal level, then of course it'd be like the FBI or something. But I thought it was all internal. I didn't know there was a third party.
That's honest.
All right, who we got next?
How you doing?
So on the same topic of, I believe, Sonia, bless her soul, because that was pretty
Horrible.
bad. So this is what I heard. He had 2 DUIs. He was transferred. And the guy that was responsible for him, the sergeant, said he didn't do his due diligence and do what he was supposed to make sure that he
Well,
was
that's
supposed to be on
absolute
that
failure.
department. That's
You
a
didn't do
problem.
your due
And then the
diligence?
other problem is, why didn't the officer pull his gun on him and tell him, hey, dude, chill? They knew that that lady had
I don't see another
schizophrenic
officer doing that.
tendencies. And the mom even asked, she said, can you send somebody that will de-escalate? And they sent a hothead over there. And that guy didn't take no responsibility. And you see how that doesn't help your standpoints when you're trying to make a difference. And then this guy won't take responsibility. And then that other
One bad
cop there
apple.
too, he didn't even say nothing. So I'm like, what would you do in that situation if an officer was, because you knew that was wrong, right?
Absolutely. This is why I'm going to say it again. I'm going to probably say it a dozen more times. Nobody hates a bad cop worse than a good cop, because what that guy did looks bad on everybody. Okay, now everybody has to bear the brunt of his poor decision. That sergeant who was
And it
there,
shines a light.
or the other officer who was there on scene, he has to live with the fact that he did not act. Trust me when I tell you, the punishment for that crime will go far beyond what the media is going to say. It'll go far beyond what you think and what everybody in this room thinks. He's got that woman's soul on his heart for the rest of his life.
I agree.
That is, and there was a second part of your question which escapes me.
The guy that's in charge of putting that deputy in that department said he didn't know about his past. I believe I heard the statement, and he's like, well, I didn't know. What kind of answer is that?
That is not an answer. It's not an acceptable answer. Police are held to a higher standard, which we should be held to a higher standard. Okay, they need to do their due diligence on who they're bringing in, because that police officer has an enormous amount of responsibility as soon as they hit the street.
And he said it with so much desensitized attitude. I'm sorry, but like I've met good and bad, and that was kind of like, bro, you give me
That
more
that
fuel to
definitely
this,
does not help
to
your
this
case.
whole argument of if there's good cop, bad cop. We don't see it when we see that, and the media loves to bring that up, which they do, because now we have all
So
we
you
have
look
all
at,
the technology now, right? We could see everything.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but
Yeah,
if you
go
look
ahead.
at the George Floyd thing,
Okay.
the officers that were standing around, they lost their job for failure to act.
Some of them were charged as well.
the
I
failure
think.
to act.
If I was in a murder, if I was in a car with a murder, would I not be charged in that murder?
You will be charged as an accessory, and I believe they were charged. I
Okay,
I
'cause
do
I don't-
believe
I
they were
don't know. I
charged.
don't
Now,
know. Okay.
I think
now
they were
I
charged
have
as
been
well.
in
I can't remember
situations
specifically
where,
what the
and
charges
one
were.
in particular,
Okay.
where there's a car chase,
Uh-huh.
everybody's adrenaline's ripping,
Yeah.
and everybody in this room who's had their adrenaline ripping, it's hard to dial it down at the
Yeah,
blink
of
of an eye.
course.
I watched them rip this guy out of the car and slam him to the pavement once they got him. And you know what I did? And you can hear it on camera. There's actual proof of this. I slapped cuffs on this guy and I said, he's cuffed. It's over.
Okay.
All right. Because I knew this guy was going to get it because their adrenaline was high. He rammed the police car. There was a whole bunch of
Oh,
other things
man.
involved in there. I have a duty to protect those who can't protect themselves. First person I protect, I'm not going to bullshit you here. First person I protect is myself. Of
course.
But beyond that, I am willing to be my brother's keeper. So once he's in custody, he is my brother. I am his keeper. All right. And I am responsible for his safety. If he dies in my custody, it's on me. So that other officer, getting
Yeah.
back to the video,
Yeah.
that other officer, he's got to live with that. He's got to live with that.
100%.
But again, police
That shit's
officers
gonna
are
haunt him
human
in his
beings.
nightmares, man.
Humans are flawed. Humans are fallible.
Do you think there's something that we have to break inside the police system about that? It's code, right?
No, it's not code.
You guys don't have code?
What do you mean? You're talking about the thin blue line?
I don't know.
Of course
I
they
would
do.
See, I would
Every
assume you
organization
had
has some
but
sort of
I
code.
appreciate you sharing.
At the end, he was talking about the thin blue line, basically cops protecting other cops. And let's be for real. When you're in an organization, you are going to have some level of leniency that somebody is not in that organization they wouldn't normally get. Another point that the guy made was there was not enough scrutiny of that officer's record. The supervisor or the sergeant or whoever was in charge of him was not aware of his previous hopping around from department to department, which is an indicator that something is going on. And my question is, are they not checking references? When I was 16 or 17, I worked at a bowling alley and I had to provide references when I applied for the job. You're giving somebody a badge, a gun, and the authority to put handcuffs on somebody and detain them, and you don't have enough due diligence to make sure that they are psychologically okay after they've been jumping from department to department. It seems like a basic check that you should do, but that's just my opinion. I don't know. Maybe I'm tripping. All right, we got a minute and a half on the clock.
Hi.
How
Let's
are
see
you?
what-
I'm good.
Let's
How
see
are
where
you?
Riley's at.
Since there's only a minute left, I just wanted to bring up something you said, like, oh, if a kid that was like shoved in lockers becomes a police officer, like he has an agenda. Like, don't you think there should be more like scanning or training done in order to become an officer? Since
And how
there's-
would you do that?
I mean, like other jobs, like there's so much more training and like, yeah.
Other jobs, there's much less training than police officers.
But there's not enough.
There's no way
If
to.
there's these people that are coming through that have an agenda that are gonna just shoot someone based off
So they haven't invented the mind
like
reading
psychologically.
tool. We go through psychological examinations, okay? And until we get that and develop that mind reading tool,
I didn't know they
these
went through
people are going to slip through
psychological
the cracks. It's
evaluations.
a fact of life. There are people,
But you
who
can't catch
just
everybody.
shouldn't be police officers.
You don't think that there could be more to
How?
scan people?
How?
I don't know, but I just feel like
That's the big question is how, because we go through multiple psychological exams. We go through the Wonderlic test, the MMPI, which are 500 question tests apiece, extensive psychological backgrounds. So beyond that, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
There's no way to tell. It's unfortunate, but guess what? Those cops who know those guys, those who can see those guys that got shoved in lockers, they know.
yeah.
They know.
All right, thank you.
So cops do go through some level of training, and I'm not here to speak about how extensive it is because I was never a cop. I wasn't military police when I was in the military, and I'm not a cop on the civilian side. So I can't speak to the level of training that they do, but I know that you don't just show up, you don't just apply, and then 30 days later you get a badge and all this authority. There is something going on in between day one and graduation day. That's where we're going to wrap it up on this topic. Do cops use lethal force as a last resort? I think they do. The cop thinks they do, but some of the panelists don't think so. What do you think? Let me know down in the comment section. Till next time. Peace.